So what they do then is, they create these new divisions like the classic physique, men's physique, where the rules actually dictate or mandate that these guys cannot be big. Because some of these guys, if you look at them, you look at the structure, these guys can be big if they wanted to, but they don't let themselves because they know they lose. But they have the potential to be that way. Now, the problem there is if you look at, as I have, if you look at each year that passes with these new divisions, the guys are getting a little bit bigger each year. This is what happened with female bodybuilding years ago. It started out with people like Rachel McLish, where they looked like normal women, but just a little bit more athletic and muscular. But they didn't look like men, and they didn't have huge muscles. They still had little small muscles. But as time went on, the girls started using more drugs. They got bigger and bigger and bigger. And towards the end, again, I'm not trying to put anyone down, but the women looked like men. I mean, some of them had more muscle than men. They were gigantic, some of these female bodybuilders. And, this is what happens in competition. And I see it already happening, even in the female shows. Like even the bikini girls are getting more muscular each year. I noticed they're getting more muscle definition. They're not big yet, but they're moving on towards that direction. And, the physique guys are getting a little bigger. And the classic guys, it's just a little bit each year. Eventually it's going to evolve where, they're in the same situation that, you see that they're going to get, because again, everybody wants to get, be ahead of the next guy. And if they feel that size is the way to do it, that's what they're going to go for, and it's inevitable. It's going to happen. See what I'm saying? I see that that's just the way, because the way, again, the human mind works is always to try and go past the established limit. You want to set new standards, in other words. That's the way all sports are. The race car driver wants to race faster. The runner wants to set a new rule running. And nobody is content with the way things are. They have to always set new standards.
Yeah.
That's the way it is with anything.
The nature of sports in general, I think.
Yeah.
You're completely right.
Yeah, that's the way it is.
So, continuing with that, we had some diseases where you could say that's popular for pro bodybuilding. For example, Flex Wheeler had huge kidney issues, and lots of pro bodybuilding had huge issues. And I wanted to ask you, what is the most dangerous PED for kidneys in bodybuilding?
I would say offhand, definitely diuretics.
Yeah.
Diuretics. In fact, Flex, you mentioned Flex, he actually had some serious problems at contests using diuretics. I was even involved in one of them because at one of the Arnold shows, I was covering the show for Joe Weider, and I was called to Flex's room. He was literally on his bed. He couldn't move. He had just gotten past the prejudging. He was clearly winning the show, but he felt like he was paralyzed. He was just cramping up everywhere. He had taken a certain drug for a diuretic action, and he had all these side effects. What he didn't realize is that the drug came with different trade names, and he used 3 different drugs that were all the same drug, so he had overdosed without realizing it. See, so anyway, I told him, I had his assistant get minerals, and we gave him water and stuff like that because he was dehydrated. He was able to come out of it and win the show, But the point is that diuretics are the most immediate danger to the kidneys because the kidneys depend on a certain fluid volume to function properly. In other words, you have to have a certain amount of water, let's say, in your blood for the kidneys to properly filter, and also the kidneys have to have slightly raised blood pressure to properly filter the blood. And when you take the diuretics, again, not only do you eliminate a lot of fluid, but you also lower the blood pressure, which puts a tremendous strain on the kidneys. So you could have a guy with normal kidneys. I mean, you want to see disaster, just have the guy dehydrate, like I've seen this in the past, where they literally cut out all fluid intake 2 days before a contest and take diuretics. That is slamming the kidneys. When they do that, it's like taking your kidneys and taking a hammer and going like this to it. That's horrible horrible. You can wind up with, if these guys were stupid enough to go in the gym and train under those conditions, meaning dehydration and also, what was I going to say, and diuretic use, let's say they wanted to get a workout in and they train really hard, then they could come up with a condition called rhabdomyolysis, which is caused by a very rapid breakdown of muscle tissue, where this blood pigment called myoglobin, it's the equivalent of hemoglobin in the muscle, carries oxygen in the muscle. That, you release massive amounts as the muscle breaks down, and the myoglobin travels to the kidney and literally plugs it up. It plugs it up, the kidney. It's like having a sink that's plugged up. What happens there is the kidneys go into complete failure. So unless you get to the emergency room, you get total kidney failure. It can happen. It can happen in a matter of hours. It can happen. So it's, again, diuretics, without question, are the most dangerous drug for the kidneys.
Yeah. I think that's one thing people have to be aware. And great Flex Wheeler story. I didn't knew this story about Flex. I just knew that he had really some issues, and he had, what I know is, or think is, he already had genetically he had issues with that on top, and right. With the diuretics and stuff. I think that was the knockout for him.
Flex did have a genetic disorder that he wasn't aware of. That's more prevalent in black people, but believe it or not, there's a form of it that you can get just from using a lot of steroids, high-dose steroids, and eating a lot of protein at the same time. You can get the same disease, but not a genetically based one. It's one that's caused by what you're doing, meaning eating, like, let's say 600 grams of protein a day, and also taking a lot of steroids causes the same diseases. It's been written up in medical journals. Luckily, most of the guys don't die. What happens is they get treated and the kidneys go back to normal. But there was one guy I remember who had it. He got off the steroids, and he lowered his protein intake. He was cured, but he lost so much muscle size that he decided to go back on the steroids. And what happened is he wound up getting kidney failure, where he had to go on dialysis. So that was very stupid on his part. But again, he had the fetish. Some of these guys, when they start to lose size, they get freaked out. It's like they can't handle it. I mean, I have to admit, I haven't been a competitor bodybuilder in over 50 years, but the thing is, even now, when the first 10 days of this kind of quarantine, I couldn't do any exercise other than ride the bike. And see, at my age, the older you are, the faster you lose muscle, especially if you've been working out regularly. If you've been working out regularly and you're older, past a certain age, and you suddenly stop with no exercise at all, the muscles shrink amazingly fast. I mean, years ago, I can go through, when I was in my 20s, I trained heavy and hard. I can go 4, 5, 6 months without training, and the only thing I would lose is strength. I'd lose very little muscle size, with no training. But this time, after only 10 days, I started to notice my arms were getting skinnier by the day, and my calves would disappear. See, because when you first lose muscle, no matter who you are, it always starts in the outer areas. It starts with the forearms, goes into the upper arms, and then the legs. It starts with the calves and moves up. The last muscle areas to go are the torso, because that's considered the most important, because your internal organs are there. But that's when you start to lose muscle, it's always in the let's say outer areas, and that's what happened. That's when I started to freak out a little bit. That's when I tried to send away from the dumbbells and stuff. As it is, thank God, things worked out. So maybe I halted the loss. I'm not losing muscle anymore because I'm working out. So it worked out for me. But that's good. But my point is that these guys, the really big guys, they just freak out if they start to lose muscle. That's why a lot of them will stay on steroids all year round, because they feel if they get off the steroids completely, they'll lose too much muscle size. And they have this idea that taking low doses of, let's say, oral steroids is safe. That's not the way it works. Every drug is based on time and dosage. Even low doses eventually cause problems. The only way to take steroids safely is you've got to get off them and allow your body to recuperate, your liver and all that stuff. If you stay on, let's say, low doses of Winstrol or Anabol, like some of these guys do, they're not giving their liver a rest, and eventually they're going to have severe problems. And but again, the thinking is, I can't get off drugs completely. I'll shrink down to nothing. It's the funny thing is, it's not even true. The funny thing is if they continue to train hard and stay on a good diet, they wouldn't lose that much muscle size when they get off. The only thing they lose is mostly water, because the steroids retain a certain amount of water. Yeah, when you if you're taking a lot of steroids and you get off them, you're going to lose size, but about 90% of it's going to be water, water weight. It's not going to be the muscle. You can keep most of the muscle if you continue to train hard. But in my experience, most of the guys that take steroids, once they, let's say stop, once the contest is over, they get off the steroids, but their training slacks off. They don't come to the gym or they don't train hard. Yeah, then if you do that, sure, you're going to lose muscle size. It's because you're not training hard. You're not trying to keep your muscle. That's what's causing the muscle size, not getting off steroids. See?
Yeah, that's one, I think, very, very good and important thing for lots of people. Yeah. Thank you for that. Speaking about that, you already talked about the most dangerous PED for kidneys. What do you think is the most dangerous drug in bodybuilding generally, not only for the kidneys but generally for the health of the guy?
No question in my mind. It's called DNP, dinitro.
DNP,
It's used as a so-called fat burner. It's a chemical. It's also used to kill weeds. It's also used in science studies to destroy cells. They use it to kill cells, and these people are taking it for fat loss. The big problem with DNP is, and I'm not going to lie, it does work. It has a tremendous thermogenic effect. It increases your metabolism 50% above baseline. Now, you take a thyroid drug, your metabolism only increases 10% above. That's how strong this stuff is. The problem with DNP is that if you take it's got a very, very limited range of safety. If you take 2 drops too much, you go into this hypothermia where your body overheats, your metabolism goes so high that you literally cook yourself, your internal organs. And if you check, a lot of people who've taken DNP aren't even bodybuilders. They've taken it because they sell it on the internet as a fat loss supplement. And some of these people have taken it and died. And the really pathetic thing is these people followed the directions. So if they followed the dosing directions, why did they die? The reason they died is because people metabolize DNP a little bit differently. Some people, it doesn't break down as fast. Same thing with coffee. Some people metabolize coffee very fast. They can drink a lot of coffee with no problem. Other people in their liver, they metabolize the coffee so slow that if they have, let's say, a cup or two of coffee, they're getting all sorts of side effects they can't handle. And the same deal with DNP, some of the people don't metabolize it fast enough, and it accumulates after 2-3 days. Now they're into a toxic area, and they die. These are young, healthy people in their 20s. Check it out. It's all over. You could go on Google and see the article. The young British girl was like very pretty girl, 23 years old, wanted to lose a little weight. She wasn't even fat. She wanted to lose a little weight. She bought DNP, followed the directions, dead 3 days later. It happens all the time. So, a lot of bodybuilders still use this stuff, but I'll tell you what, they're playing with fire. I mean, I've been cursed at, and people have yelled at me because they say I'm full of crap about DNP. It's safe if you take it within the normal, dosing, suggested doses. But again, you never know when you're one of those people that slow metabolizes it. And after the 3rd day, you could, you might either have to go to the hospital and be lucky to survive, or you'll just die. They found people dead on the floor in their apartments after taking DNP. There's no question. That stuff can kill you really fast. DNP is the most dangerous drug.
Yeah, I think that's not worth to experience with that one. Even for pro bodybuilders, I don't think that they should or need that.
The second most dangerous, and it's a distant second, would be diuretics, because those two drugs, DNP and diuretics, they can kill you very fast. I mean, a matter of hours. Whereas any side effects from steroids, for example, or growth hormone, that takes a long time to show up. Nobody ever dies after taking a shot of a steroid or a pill of Winstrol. You don't just die a few hours later. It never happens.
Yeah.
But in other words, you take one of these things, you take too many diuretics at once, or you take DNP, you could die in a matter of hours or 1 or 2 days. And it's been documented It's not my opinion. It's been documented in medical journals over and over and over again. So,
yeah, people should be aware of that, definitely. You already talked about the current situation and generally, all those guys who are training, I think they don't even have to be competitive bodybuilders, but when they shrink a little, like you said, they get all, their mind plays them, games and stuff. So do you think, or what do you think is the reason generally, even for pro bodybuilders, I see that all the time. It's in sport where you judge things based on your body, based on how you look, your muscles. You also criticize things based on that. But why do you think our bodybuilders so sensitive of criticism? Do you think they have psychological things going on, or do you think they have minority complexes? What do you think is the reason for being so sensitive? Although you're a bodybuilder and you should, live with that and be so, always in fear that you lose a little muscle and I don't know what and what people will think and stuff. What do you think is the reason?
Well, in psychology, they have a term for that. They call it reverse anorexia. Or I can't remember. There's another term. There's another term. I can't remember it offhand. They coined the term for big guys that think they're too small. It's, in other words, in anorexia nervosa, which is more common in women, very skinny women who are almost like skeletal will look in the mirror and will see fat. They'll look and say, "I'm fat. I'm still fat," but everyone else sees them as a walking skeleton. It's their mind plays tricks on them. And these guys, when they look in the mirror, some of these guys are big, and they say, "I'm still too small." So what they're doing is they're putting themselves up. They're comparing themselves on a scale to people like Jay Cutler or Ronnie Coleman, these gigantic mass monsters. But the truth of the matter is, it's a very artificial way of looking at yourself because most bodybuilders, even the pros, will not approach those guys. That's why Ronnie Coleman won year after year, because he just wiped everybody out with his size. I mean, if all the other guys could have been as big as him, of course they would have been tried to. They just couldn't be as big as him because he had his own genetics, or maybe it was the way he trained, that heavy stuff. Who knows? I think it was a combination, most likely. But the point is that, again, they look in the mirror and they see things that nobody else sees. Their brain plays tricks on them. Oh, my arms are too small. They got 22-inch arms and the arms are too small. Again, this is like, it's almost like an illusion. They're not seeing reality is the best way to answer that.
Yeah. Do you also think that, those guys more likely than others tend to have inferiority complexes and stuff?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no question. Yeah, there's no question. Because, again, they never think they're good enough. They literally put themselves down. I'm too small and, I'm garbage. I can't get big and this and that, and then, it probably leads a lot of them to do other things like, use mind drugs to calm themselves down, smoke a pot, maybe they drink a little or, use cocaine to try and ease their horrible feelings about themselves. It could be really dangerous to think like, I think the best way to handle it is not to compare yourself to anybody else. Just use your own body. And this is what Frank Zane and some of the smarter guys do. They just use themselves as their own yardsticks. And, they look at pictures of them as they appeared, let's say, a year before, and they'll analyze it. Well, let's see, what do I need to improve here? They don't look at anyone else. They basically compete against themselves. Arnold once said that the key to winning the Olympia years ago, when he was competing, he says the way to win it year after year, you can't, once you reach a certain level of muscle size, it's very difficult to completely change your physique from year to year, where you get twice as big next year. It just doesn't happen. So all you can do is improve certain muscles that maybe are a little bit behind. So say, Arnold used the example of the forearms. One year I noticed my forearms were a little bit out of proportion to my upper arms, so I trained my forearms harder. And when I competed in the Olympia, it's amazing, without even realizing, the judges, actually they look at you and say, gee, there's something different about Arnold. He looks better than last year. In fact, he's not really better. He's not more cut, but his forearms are a little bit bigger and more muscular. And this registers in the judges' minds to think that Arnold has improved. He wins again. That's what that was Arnold's secret. That's what he used to do. Every year he'd choose like a different area to improve, and it worked. He won the Olympia. 6 years. Well, the last year is a little bit debatable. The 80 Olympia.
Yeah, that's debatable.
Yeah, but all the other years he was a pretty clear winner. I mean, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
Man, that was his trick. That's what he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Arnold was one of the guys who oftenly talked about psychology and stuff. The psychology of the guys and how to trick them out, how to make them unconfident about themselves.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that should be mentioned. I heard one time, Mark Rasool said that Mark Rasool probably.
Yeah. Sure, I know.
He was a mass monster, and he himself said in a seminar, I was there, after he, retired, he said that even though he was so big, he felt like a pussy the whole day, and he only felt big when he was, pumped up in the gym. Other than that, the other 22 hours, him being 300 pounds, he still felt like a little guy.
He's a classic example. And I just remembered the term. It's called bigorexia.
Yeah.
In other words, it's basically male anorexia, where these guys who are huge, like Marcus, think they're small. But it's all in their minds. They convince themselves that, but when you're pumped up in the gym, you can see the muscles are temporary.
Yeah.
So now I'm big, but like, they leave the gym, the pump goes down after a while. They expect somehow the pump to stay 24 hours a day. So they get very disappointed. Oh, I'm small. I'm a pussy. My muscles are small again. It's kind of, it's a mental illness is what it is. There's no other way to call it. It's a mental illness. It's like depression and other anxiety. It's just another form of mental illness.
Yeah. Other guy I knew from the gym, the guy was not even a competitive bodybuilder, but a new guy came in and he was just it was like his first or second week. And he said to the other guy that kind of looks small or used to be bigger than he is now. And that guy who was not even a competitive bodybuilder, he was, his mind played games for days. He said he couldn't sleep well after that event. It was like a huge thing for him, and he talked often about it. So it seems that even if guys who are not into bodybuilding criticize you on that, they seem to get offended very, very quickly.
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
Yeah. Okay, so another question. We talked a little bit about supplements. Do you think that you probably all, those natural test boosters?
Yes.
Do you think for a natural guy using natural test boosters that this has, really a positive effect on their testosterone levels, for them to go higher than they naturally are? Well, or do you think it's a waste of money?
Well, first of all, most of them don't work. That's the first problem. Most of the testosterone boosters just don't work, right? The few that do work, the way they work, they will increase your testosterone. It's kind of comparable to exercise. When you work out with weights, your testosterone goes up, but it only goes up for about an hour after the workout. Then it comes back down to baseline. Unfortunately, that's not enough to have real anabolic effects in muscle. To have anabolic effects, you have to have higher testosterone all the time. That's why steroids make you bigger, because they stay in you and they're there all the time, and they stimulate muscle growth. Now the testosterone boosters, the few that do work, they will stimulate your testosterone again only for a short time. So it's not enough really to put any muscle mass on. But there is an exception. If somebody, let's say, is not taking any drugs, whether you're young or old, and you're already low in testosterone for any reason, especially guys over 40, because your testosterone tends to go down past that. If you take those in conjunction with weight training, the little bit of testosterone boost you get might actually help you. But in other words, what I'm saying is, it will only work if you're already low in testosterone. If you have normal testosterone levels, they won't do anything. They literally will do nothing.
So at maximum, they will put you up to natural testosterone levels. So
they can't give. In other words, if you're asking me, will they give you the same levels as, let's say, steroids? No, they don't even come close. All they can do is boost your. There's a certain range of normal testosterone. Let's say from 300 to 1,000. Let's say your testosterone is fairly low at 300, right? If you take those, you might be able to get it up to 500. So you'll get a little bit of a boost. But, compare this to steroids. If you take almost any steroid, your testosterone is going to go off the scale. It's going to exceed 1,000. And there's no natural substance that can do that. None. No matter what you read, there's no natural substance that can equal the effects of pharmaceutical steroids.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just, people are believing it because they don't want to use steroids, but at the same time, they want to get a kick out of supplements and they want to exceed their natural levels and stuff.
Well, what I found humorous was that the last generation of so-called pro-hormones, you remember the pro-hormone supplements?
Yeah.
Well, the last generation was actually real anabolic steroids. These were old steroids that they were produced by drug companies, but they were never marketed because animal studies showed they were too toxic. So they were just put back on the shelf more or less. But there was a certain book that listed the structures of all these, steroids that were synthesized but never released. A couple of companies got a hold of the book, which was published in 1968, and they actually produced they reproduced these old steroids, and they called them pro-hormones, right? Now the problem is that the people that took them just like the animals, got the same side effects, liver problems. And, after a while, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration here, they noticed it. They pulled it. They changed the law. Congress passed the bill. They pulled them off the market. But the ironic and almost kind of funny part of it is people would buy those supplements saying, well, I don't take steroids, but I'm going to take this because it's an over-the-counter supplement. Little did they know they were actually taking steroids. I thought that was kind of, I don't think, honestly, I don't think they would have taken the supplements if they knew they were actual steroids, but they were never marketed as steroids because that would have caught the attention of the food drug. So they made it look like they were natural stuff, that you could find in food and stuff. It was all nonsense. They were synthetic steroids that were never released for a good reason.
Yeah. One other thing, what I, always ask myself is, what's your view on that? Talking about all those fat loss stuff, do you think a guy, let's say there is guy A and guy B, and they have the same genetics, okay? Exactly same age, same sex, everything. And one of them, he gets fat and he loses weight again. And the other guy never got fat, okay? Yeah. He always stayed in shape. Do you think the guy who once was a former fat guy can get easier, fat again than the other guy? That's what I see all the time. Guys who used to be fat, they slim down, but they always have to have the problems to stay. So what do you think?
Oh, there's no question. I'll tell you why. Because you have to look at the nature of fat cells. Now,
yeah.
most people who are obese or have excess body fat, they have what they call hypertrophic hyperplastic obesity, which means they have an excess number of fat cells, which are called lipocytes, and the fat cells they have are not only have the greater number, but they're larger than normal. They store more fat. So what happens when these people go on a diet is that the stored fat is released. If they die in exercise, it's burned up, oxidized. But the thing is, those fat cells are still there. In other words, it's like taking a glass of water. You have a full glass of water, right? Now you throw out the water, but the glass is still there. Now you can pour the water back in, and it's right back where it started. That's the way fat cells are. So once you have a larger number of fat cells and bigger fat cells, it's much easier to regain the fat. And the real danger people don't realize is, let's say you have a person who wasn't naturally born that way with the excess number and excess size of fat cells, but let's say they were fairly slim and they decided, let's say a bodybuilder, they decide, I want to be really big, and they really overeat and pile the food in, and they wind up getting really big, but a lot of it's fat, right? A lot of it's fat. Well, what they've done is they've taken their existing fat cells and they've caused them to split and form new fat cells. It's called hyperplasia. And they think this. Some people think it happens in muscle cells too, but there's not a lot of evidence for muscle, but there's a lot of evidence for fat. They know for a fact this happens. In other words, once you reach a certain level of body fat, the existing fat cells split and form new fat cells, so you can get fatter and fatter and fatter. And remember, those fat cells, once formed, they stay there. So now you're always in danger, even if you go back on a diet, you can always in danger of getting back, becoming fat again. Once you have that, it's always there to happen again, always. That's why people should always never try and gain too much weight. Don't let yourself get fat, because you're creating a scenario where it's going to become a lot easier to get fat later on. Let's say for some reason you can't be active, you can't exercise or whatever, you will get fat. You will get, even with the same amount of calories. This is why a lot of people, you'll see they were slim when they were young, then they get to be middle-aged, they're married with kids, and they start to get fatter and fatter and fatter. Why? Because they were more active I'm not talking about bodybuilding, I'm talking about anyone. That's because they moved around more, they were more active when they were younger, and now because of, the kids, or, they're not as active, they don't have time to exercise, but they're eating the same amount of calories. So the fat cells are, filling up, and they're splitting off, and they're getting fatter and fatter and fatter. This is why a lot of people you'll see, again, not bodybuilder or athlete, a lot of people who are slim when they were young, you see them when they're older, they're noticeably fatter. This is the reason why. And unless they cut their calories down to commensurate with their level of physical activity, it's inevitable. And there's a term for this. They call it creeping obesity, because you get fat gradually. Over the years, you get fatter. And sometimes people don't even realize it, Men and women, they're getting fatter and fatter. Nobody's saying anything to them. And then something will happen where, let's say they have to go to a wedding or a high school reunion, and they'll look at them and say, they'll try on some of their own clothes and say, what's going on here? What happened here? And then they finally look at themselves in the mirror and they say, wait, how did I get this fat? They don't even realize it. It happens so slowly that it suddenly hits them that they've gained all this fat. A lot of people do notice it, of course. I mean, it's right in front of them. But a lot of people don't look at themselves as carefully as human. They're not like bodybuilders where they'll stand in the mirror and do poses. They don't look at themselves as carefully as others, But eventually they do notice it. And this is the reason. As you get older, again, your metabolism tends to slow down, and then lack of activity really contributes to it. So unless, if you don't want to gain weight or become fat, you got to reduce your calories to match your activity level. Otherwise, it's inevitable. You will get fat.
Yeah, I think that's a natural life cycle for lots of, 60-70% of people. Absolutely. You see them, they older they get, the fatter they get.
Yeah, it happens to most people. It happens. I see it all the time. I see people that, were actually thin when they were younger, and then I see them, they're in their 50s and 60s, and I'm not going to say they're massively obese, but they're kind of chubby. And these people were always thin, and you never saw any fat on them. Now they got bellies and fat over their waist. That's the cause. That's what happens. Now if you continue to work out and you do, let's say, aerobics and weight training, you'll burn up with a lot of calories. There's a good chance that you will not gain weight and fat as you get. That's the exception. If you exercise and eat right, you don't have to get fat. But most people don't. So if you don't do that, you're going to get fat. That's simple.
And one thing, I think lots of natural guys are doing it because they do think that they gain muscle faster when they are as big as possible, and they look at all those Rich Piana stuff. And do you think, or what do you think? What is the right body fat, to gain muscle the most effective way? Do you have to get fat, or is it better to stay, in low body fat? Talking about the body fat percentage.
I think that I just did an article on that for my Applied Metabolics newsletter. Basically, the article was about do you have to gain weight to get big, muscles. Now, what the research shows was basically, you do have to increase calories. In other words, if you want to be bigger, you have to increase calories, but you want to stop to the point where it starts to become fat. In other words, it takes experimentation. Different people can eat more calories than others due to different factors such as resting metabolic rate, levels of what they call thermogenic tissue, which is brown adipose tissue, or they call it BAT. In other words, but you have to experiment. I can't give you a set number of calories and say eat this number of calories and you'll be able to put on muscle without because it varies. It's impossible to say in both men and women. It takes experimentation. But you can use the mirror and your appearance as a guide. If you're trying to get bigger and you added calories, and it should be in the form of more protein, good carbs, not the crappy refined carbohydrates like sugars and all that, and good fats like monounsaturated fat, olive oil, nuts, and a little bit of saturated fat, but not don't go crazy over that. Omega-3 fats and fish. That's where the calories should come from. But you have to monitor yourself. And if you notice that you're putting a lot of fat on your waist and all the definition, that's when you got to cut back the calories, because all you're doing is you're not making your muscles bigger, you're putting fat on. And again, the danger of that is when you're putting the fat on, you can get that situation I talked about earlier, where you get that hyperplasia of fat cells. Now you're going to have that fat for the rest of your life. It's not going to disappear. That's a real danger. There was a famous bodybuilder years ago. He won the Mr. Universe 4 times. He's still alive today. He's almost, I think he's 89 years old. Bill Pearl, his name is. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
Bill Pearl, yeah.
Bill Pearl once wrote that he used to judge his conditioning by his abdominals. If he couldn't see his abs, he would cut back on his calories. He knew he was starting to get fat. He had to clearly see his abdominals, right? Now, strangely enough, I use that myself as a yardstick, because I used to bulk up myself. When I trained or competed in bodybuilding, bulking up was, especially the guys who use drugs, we would try and gain weight in between contests, because that's the only way we could put size on. Because when you gain weight, you can lift heavier. And when you lift heavier, that's how you gain muscle, You can't gain muscle by, well, you could by with light weight, but we didn't know back then. Back then, all we knew is that you had to train heavy to get big. So we try to gain some weight so we can lift heavy, get big. So what I would do is, I'd start to see if my abs were completely gone, then I would cut back. I would usually cut back on. What I did is I tended to cut back on the carbs mainly. If I cut back on the carbs, I'd still keep the protein up. I'd still eat a good amount of fat. I'd cut down on the carbs a lot, and my abs within about 3 weeks would come back, even though I'm still gaining weight. They would still come back. Because that's my particular metabolism. Maybe because I have diabetes in my family, I'm very sensitive to carbohydrates. In other words, I can adjust my body fat level just by modifying my carbohydrate intake. In other words, if I want to, let's say, lose body fat pretty fast, all I have to do is cut my carbs down low, and within 3 weeks, I could see 3 inches off my waist. No change in my workouts at all, just by cutting the carbs. That doesn't work for everybody. It works for me. See? It might not work for you. You might need more carbs. See, again, everybody's different when it comes to that.
So what you're saying is, at a certain level of eating calories and stuff, more will not build muscle, but it will only result in fat.
Exactly.
So, that's
right. In fact, I've seen bodybuilders over the years, especially years ago, where, when the bulking up was popular, they would eat too much calories and they would gain too much weight, and then they would diet and lose all the fat, but they never were as muscular as they were before. They never, and that again is because of the new fat cells they developed. Well, once you have those new fat cells, it limits the amount of muscularity. I mean, you see some of the most muscular guys of bodybuilding. A guy from Austria, Andreas Munzer, who passed away a couple years ago. I mean, I knew this guy. I mean, I saw him in person up close. His skin looked like it was transparent. You could see every muscle fiber. I mean, I didn't even have to ask. I knew that this guy had very tiny fat cells, and he didn't have fat cells. So he was literally walking around with like pure muscle. That's that's the look you get when you have very small fat cells. In other words, and I'll say further that when you start bodybuilding, if you're fat when you start, if you're, let's say, a fat guy, fat woman, it is going to be harder for you to get that super muscular look like a Munzer has. You can get very muscular, don't get me wrong. You can get ripped, but you'll never get the look of a Munzer unless you have the small fat cells naturally. You just can't get there. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. So for example, that's a great thing what you mentioned, because so what this says is, guys, for example, like you knew Drew Brewer or some BSN guy, and Greg Kovach, for example. They used to be really, really big, out of shape big when they were in contests. And if you check those guys, if you check their contest history, you never really see them ripped, as for example, like you said, Andreas Munzer. So maybe guys who are taking it too far in off season, that's maybe a reason why they can't get that condition, because it's just,
That is the reason. That is the
yeah,
reason. I'll tell you right now. Again, once you achieve a certain level of body fat,
yeah,
even if you started out pretty lean, those fat cells are there. And even if they're not completely filled, like I say, if you empty them out from dieting and exercise, the cell wall remains, and that's going to prevent you from getting that Munster look where you look like where you can see
yeah,
his blood flowing. I mean, he was so ripped. I mean, you can't get that look with large fat cells. You cannot. You cannot
yeah,
get that. Yeah.
yeah. So because people are doing, all they are doing is they try to use the evidence in drugs,
Right.
but that thing what we just mentioned maybe would be a more natural explanation to why
Right.
they're not that conditioned and stuff. So that I think
Well,
is another great view.
interestingly enough, though, the drugs actually, I mean, to be totally open about it, the
Yeah,
drugs actually help these guys. It prevents them from getting overly fat in some cases because you have what they call pluripotent stem cells. Now, these are cells that can turn into either fat cells or muscle cells. It's like they can take they can take either road. Right? Imagine two roads. These cells can take the fat road or the muscle road. Turns out when you take steroids, you push them to the muscle road. So in other words, if these same guys were eating the same amount of calories, let's say, and weren't taking the steroids, the stem cells would go towards the fat route, see? But because they're taking the steroids, now goes towards muscle. So for that reason, taking the steroids will prevent them. This is why you don't see guys who are actually obese on the stage. You won't see
yeah,
well, really, you'll never see that. And a lot of it has to do with the steroids because it
yeah,
prevents the formation of the new fat cells. A lot of people don't know that.
yeah. I think they people try to imitate those pro bodybuilding nutrition plans, but what they don't check is the use of GH and fat burners and other stuff.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
the end result is not them getting huge muscles, but them getting huge bellies. The guys
Yeah.
try to imitate it.
You mentioned GH, for example. Now,
Yeah,
GH has a reputation as a fat burner. How does it burn fat? It doesn't actually burn fat. What it does is, the way fat cells release fat, it has to do with hormones called catecholamines, norepinephrine, epinephrine. When they get to the fat cell, they stimulate a cascade. They stimulate an enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase, which causes the fat cells to release the fat cell. The fat in the fat cells is in the form of what they call triglycerides. Now, when you stimulate hormone-sensitive lipase, it causes the stored fat to break down into what constitutes triglycerides, which is fatty acids and glycerol, and then they enter the blood where they can be burned. Right now, what does growth hormone do? Growth hormone makes the fat cells more sensitive to the catecholamines, more sensitive. So, in other words, when you take growth hormone, your fat cells become even more, let's say, amenable to releasing the fat faster than normal. Faster than normal. That's why
yeah,
growth hormone stimulates fat loss. It's called lipolysis. That's the medical term. Yeah. You see, but growth hormone itself, you understand, growth hormone itself, a lot of people say growth hormone burns fat. No, the only thing that burns fat is oxygen. In other words, it occurs in the mitochondria. Growth hormone doesn't burn fat, but it stimulates the a scenario where you will be able to burn more fat. That's what growth hormone does. So,
yeah, yeah. That's one great point. Yeah.
yeah.
So I loved all the questions. I love the talk and your answers. I think people really get some information out of it, even more the natural guys who try to imitate, the pros guys without taking some things in account. And also the immune system stuff they maybe should do, even if they're not training and doing, bodybuilding. So I think people will definitely get something out of this interview. And, to end this stuff, you can definitely follow and you probably should follow Jerry Brainum on social media. You said you have a Facebook page, you have an Instagram page,
Right.
and especially you can talk about it a couple of sentences. your Applied Metabolics newsletter. I think that's the thing where they get their information the most.
And let me put it to this way, Dennis. Anybody who's interested in like the type of in-depth information that I covered briefly in this interview should definitely subscribe to my Applied Metabolics newsletter, because what I do is I cover all the topics of interest to anybody who's involved in bodybuilding or fitness or exercise or athletics. I go into detail, mechanisms, why it works, and I talk about most of the stuff I talk about is not available on the internet. You won't find it on websites or anything like that. I do a lot of work to uncover this stuff, and each issue is, everybody who subscribes, I don't care what your level of education, you will learn something. I guarantee, even if you have a PhD or an MD, I have a lot of MDs that are subscribers because they're always telling me they're learning new stuff. And the thing is, it's 40 to 50 pages every month. You don't have to read it all at once. A lot of people will see that and say, "Whoa, I can't read all that." But I had it designed so you could read it on a tablet, you could read it on a computer, you could read it on your phone. You could read it in small chunks. But the point is, you will learn something. And the thing is, I only write. This is an important point. I only write about practical stuff. I'm not interested in impressing anyone about how smart I am. I want to write about stuff that you can use, that you can apply to your own life and your own workout. You could use it today. You know what I mean? You don't have to wait up the line. This is stuff you can use today immediately. And again, it's stuff that's not widely known. So that's why I call it applied metabolic. It's very practical information. It's not very expensive. My newsletter is average. It's like a third of the price of most of the other digital publications. It comes out the first of every month. And as I said, if you subscribe, I send you an invitation to join my private Applied Metabolics Facebook page. I also have an email portal on the Applied Metabolics website where I'll answer short questions only from current subscribers, right? And also another way, I do put out videos every Tuesday. I have my own YouTube channel. People are welcome to subscribe. That's free, of course.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I usually cover nutrition and exercise in the videos. In the last couple of videos, I've been talking about ways to deal with this COVID-19 thing. I've been talking about nutritional measures. In fact, I'm doing another video. I just came across, again, new research that nobody knows about concerning, ways on how to deal with this COVID. I'm going to do one more video on it probably this week. But normally, again, my videos are about average 20 to 25 minutes, completely free. People are welcome to join us. I post a new video every Tuesday. So that's another way they can, reach me or see me. Yeah.
I know your YouTube channel, and it's.
Oh, by the way, before I forget, the website address is www.appliedmetabolics.com. I want to make sure I say that.
Yeah. I will definitely link in your webpage. I will put a link into it. People can directly click on it, and also your YouTube channel, because I think everybody can take something out of that too.
Right.
Those two things, and it's pretty affordable. And it's been like that for years, I think. I think the last interview we did, the price didn't increase, I think. I just checked it before the interview.
Yeah, it still hasn't increased. It's been the same price ever since I started. I have not increased. And like I say, the other digital, because I checked a lot of them before I started my news. I wanted to see what they look like, what the content was. They're 3 times the cost of mine. 3 times. Not a little bit more, 3 times, So I don't think, it's $10 a month. I mean, come on, that comes out, that's less than the cost of a daily newspaper. Not that a lot of people read newspapers anymore, but I'm saying if you bought a newspaper here in this town, LA, it's $2.50 for a daily newspaper. My newsletter comes out to something like, 60 cents a day or something like that. It's, and the amount of information, useful information, I have to say, I think is priceless. Priceless. Like I say, everybody will get something out of that newsletter. I absolutely guarantee it.
And people can also, how is it like they can subscribe to it and they can quit it monthly, or is it yearly, or how is the
newsletter is monthly? Yeah. I also have an ebook that's available at jerrybrainum.com. It's called Anabolic something. I can't even remember the name of it. Anabolic something. I know it's funny.
I will look that up. And I will put it.
jerrybrainum.com. It's basically a book it's about 100 pages for natural bodybuilders who don't want to use drugs, but want to make maximum gains. That's what the book's for. You know, it's jerrybrainum.com. Yeah, so that's that. Yeah.
Okay, so people definitely check that out. I hope you liked that interview. You can contact Jenny Brainum on his social media platforms, subscribe to his newsletter. And thanks for taking your time out of your schedule and doing that interview again.
Sure.
Without planning it so much. I think it was really, really spontaneous. I just hooked you up on Facebook Messenger and it was really, really quick. Some of those guys, you have to talk with them about, you know, months and months, and then they can do it on one specific date. But you're really, really comfortable with this interview stuff. So thank you for that. Definitely.
Sure. Nice talking to you again, Deniz.
Okay, so bye. Have a great day.
You too.
And see you soon.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.